A pleasure to me all at last. And so, we're at it with more films I should have talked about years ago. Now, a couple of things to address real quickly. The temperatures, for some reason, despite being the last week of November, have increased. Quite significantly, even. We're expected to see maybe 60 degrees worth of temperatures for the next week, which is kind of surreal. And of course, you might be wondering, why am I in the background that is well known with HJN, another series of mine? And so, pretty much the whole room is going to be decked out with decorations. So the spot in which that I had previously occupied will probably not be of any usage for the rest of the season. If it does, of course, continue well beyond Christmas, then maybe I'll head on back to that area. But for now, though, we'll just stick to things as they are. Anyways, though, what I got to talk about for something in particular for this series is that another film I could have talked about many times was known as Mid90's. Yeah, this was of course one of the more prominent roles of Sonny Suljic, a child actor whom we have had for about 20 years now. Yeah, so this year does mark his 20th birthday, but at the time, at 13, in 2018, who would have thought he would be involved with something that involved a lot of skateboarding, video games, and a ton of gang-related jargon. Mainly a lot of slang terms and a lot of foul-mouthing, you know. The kind of bad language they have here pretty much makes sailors and angry video game nerd look like innocent people. Either way you look at it, though, part of the reason why Mid90's sought out this sort of controversial necessitation was mainly because of the works of Jonah Hill. And we know Jonah Hill has been in a lot of great movies like 21 Jump Street, Moneyball, Megamind, and then of course there was one of his more famous roles in Superbad. But that's a story for another day. Mid90's centers on a young boy whom is given the nickname Sunburn. Now, he basically does belong in a suburban household in California in the mid-90s, like the title itself suggests. This was essentially at the height in which that PlayStation, skateboarding, and a number of other things were occurring out there. But the mid-90s, of course, was one era in which that Jonah Hill himself had experienced over the years. And this film was supposedly his kind of hot take on what the time was like, in a more modern day inquiry. And that's what this film is truly all about. Now, I actually saw this in theaters at the same time that I actually went and saw First Man. Now, I'll probably talk about that some other time as well. Anyways, though, Mid90's, like I said, you have a young 13-year-old whom at first is brutally beaten down by his older brother, whom, of course, you might remember Lucas Hedges in a number of different ways. But this was one of the first times that I recalled seeing him as well. Between Hedges and Suljic's performances, they do a pretty good job at being brothers with a not so good relationship. The fact that they are beating each other up at the very start of the film, in a quiet setting of course, which abruptly cuts to show the kind of wounds that Sunburn had obtained. But later on we do get to see that the reason why it happened was because he went into his brother's room. Yeah, and he did not like that at all. There eventually came a point in which that Sunburn discovers a CD in which that his brother would like. It's eventually given to him as a gift, but with little reception, or even a thank you for that matter. But then there also comes a point in time in which that, in a bit of a shopping spree across the city, he comes across a skateboard shop in which that it has a good skateboard that he's looking forward to own, but it does cost him a good amount of money. He's had some chats here and there with the staff of the skate shop, and then of course there were the many friends that had gathered around. After some time he spent at the shop, and after grabbing $80 from his mother, upon which she eventually questioned him for it, to his denial, which obviously we know that the brother is not so happy about the situation. $80 stolen from their mother, and obviously he's going to pin the blame on someone else for it. But either way you look at it though, the rest of this whole film is pretty much just the idea of a young boy basically learning how to thrive in gang-related environments. What this gang pretty much does is a number of different vulgar talks, some skateboarding, some tunes, hangouts at the shop, and a number of other different things. We do get a number of good cinematography that Jonah Hill himself was able to provide alongside the camera work and also the accompanying music in the background. A couple of notable tunes are there in the soundtrack, but more importantly is the fact that as time goes on for this Sunburn kid, man, if you're wondering why he's called Sunburn, that's because at one point they discuss about the idea of POCs getting sunburned, and basically he sits there for a while wondering, what are black people? Yeah, this of course is just the fact that sometimes we got early teens in their earlier years of life not understanding what true life is like out there. I mean, not having the basic knowledge, like what a black person even is. Sometimes that can come back to bite him, but because it was the mid-90s, I guess they accepted it in some format. Either way you look at it though, that's technically how he got his nickname. And everybody else just has a number of different nicknames. I mean, there's this guy named Fourth Grade, whom apparently didn't do a good job in school over the years, and that's how he got his nickname. And then there's this guy with quite an obscene name. And I mean, the rest of it is just the icing on the cake. Because we do get to see a small party in which that the guys go out to, and this is basically Sunburn's first exposure to a girl, basically. Despite being 13, he still went ahead and took a bit of a risky route. And then when coming back home, seemingly drunk, he basically gets into a bit of a fight with his brother again, of which that he would end up winning. And whoa, even after strangling himself with a PS1 controller, his mother still won on as far as to drag him to that same shop he had been going to many times and basically arranging a permanent goodbye from the crew. Sunburn's not happy about it though, so he just screams at his mother until she's forced to leave him behind. Or at least that's seemingly what happens, because with all these jump cuts going from scene to scene to scene without any real big transition into it, it's basically like if they had like several minutes worth of film into it and a number of it had been cut out. I mean, think about it. Between all the vulgar dialogue and the somewhat explicit nature of this film, we know Jonah Hill has had that sort of reputation in his acting career, but at the same time, you might have to wonder, what exactly did he have in mind when he was planning this out? But you know what though? The real big killer comes around when, after another night of some drinks and some partying, they decide to head on home, driving while drunk. Of course, we know how this ended, right? A collision occurs, and Sunburn is sent to the hospital with some injuries. Upon waking up, he realizes all of his friends are with him, and even his mother shows up. Basically, she felt bad about what had happened with him, but even worse on account of the fact that he basically got involved in a drunk driving accident. But strangely, she wasn't really mad at him about it. Just maybe slightly disappointed in this at worst. But everybody knows that at the end of the day, this was more of an accident than something like that. I'm sure if the mother was around today, and like if this sort of thing were to happen where her 13-year-old son ended up in a drunk driving accident in 25, then man, I'm sure the 13-year-old would receive a huge punishment. Probably even some time in juvenile hall. I mean, it's not exactly their fault, but still. This kind of accountability and the kind of laws that have been established over the years could really be a differentiation between the old and the new. But 30 years later, though, you could say that since the mid-90s, we had seen a dramatic decrease in drunk driving entirely. Because as we know, if there's one sort of automobile-related accident that's known to occur more often, it's the usage of our phones. Yeah, no joke. Millions of accidents happen worldwide every year because of mobile phone usage. And sometimes because of other reasons as well. But either way you look at it, the epidemic of electronic-related usage behind the wheel has become rather common. Now, I myself haven't seen that many accidents relating to phone usage, but man, it can be quite a distraction, especially if you're not skilled at multitasking. But Mid90's comes to an end with the crew realizing something. Sunburn is someone whom they have to protect, rather than put into their dangerous escapades. Because think about it, it's already pretty dangerous with a 13-year-old boy like Sunburn being involved in gang-related activities, parties, and drinks that are certainly not fit for a teenager like him with a brain that's still developing. And on top of that, there's all the skateboarding. That already is something that could truly end his life if he's not careful. And when you think about it, the idea of skateboarding in California in the 90s was just gigantic. Tony Hawk. Need I say more? Either way though, this movie was a unique piece of independent mind, but it's not exactly as independent as many others out there. In spite of Jonah Hill's direction, this film does fall under the idea of satire, which is something that I myself am a pretty big fan of. At the same time though, I can understand the conflicts that many people might have with a film that truly exercises the kind of upper limitations possibly being shattered on such things like violence and language, and of course, affiliation of minors with certain adult-related activities, like drinking and girls. But when you think about it though, this was the kind of thing that was actually rather common. Not many teenagers knew how to play responsibly out there, or do responsibly. And because some teens, even today, might not have the full picture of how life itself works, it does make sense, from most perspectives, knowing that our parents are supposed to be a lot more careful out there, knowing that sometimes things can be pretty dark and grisly. It's certainly not at all like how it was back then. The times have gotten much simpler, and we're able to learn from certain mistakes that people have made over the years so that we don't end up with such tragic events or mishaps. Yet this doesn't fall on everybody's ears, because some people just don't care about it anymore. Perhaps it's because some are desensitized to certain things, or it could be because they've given up on parenting, which, given the circumstances of how life can truly be quite a large amount of cargo to carry on your back all day long, even today, in spite of how simplicity allows things to regularly become easier to work with, it's probably true what they say. Even the iPhone, despite all that it can do for us, cameras, boomboxes, calculators, notepads, etc., it's just not enough. Anyways though, Mid90's, by my assessment, I've watched it 3 times since it came out, which would technically make it 4 times I've seen it. And I overall still do appreciate the somewhat independent nature of this, but I'm not exactly a huge fan of all the crazy jump cuts they make, like when Sunburn and his older brother, again played by Lucas Hedges, are fighting each other, and then it jump cuts to Sunburn revealing his wounds. Like, why not have some sort of climax to the whole thing? I guess because it's just an older brother beating up a teenager, that would have been pretty graphic as it stood. So, for my final scoring of Mid90's, I give it a solid 8.7 out of 10.1. So while it's not exactly the best way to make an independent related film, or anything to really bring a lot of child actors or lesser known actors into account, it's important to note that we have been seeing some more activity from the likes of not just Sonny Soljic and Lucas Hedges, but from many of the others that were involved in this cast. And Jonah Hill himself is actually going to be starring in some new films, including a film coming out in 2026, which I'm pretty sure is gonna be pretty good. I mean, Cutoff, a title that simple, might speak out a lot. Who knows? But when it comes out, we'll have things to say about. Anyways, though, that's it for this piece of films I should have talked about years ago. And I'm happy that I'm continuing this going forward. But hey, we still got some pretty warm weather here. I could probably marathon through recording many episodes, probably more so than I can imagine here. At least I can take advantage of a lot of good break time from a lot of my work here. So, if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side.